Hello everybody. Very nice to see you all and to wrap the day up. And thank you very much to everyone who's organised this. Now I want to talk about an old subject using data generated through a very new medium, Facebook. So this is about the Great Spirit, known sometimes as Puntumid, which is Twisted Heel, in the Collabitt Highlands minefield site. I want to address the question of how to understand what this is about, what happened in this conversation on Facebook that I'm going to show you, and to think about what it means to people there. So this is Padale, the Collabitt Highlands, which is in the interior of Sarawak. And I've been doing fieldwork there since 1986. At that time, people depended heavily on the forest. They grew rice, but relied very heavily on wild foods too. But there's been an increasing interaction with the outside world since then. The interaction with the outside world started much earlier, but it began to speed up from about the 70s or 80s. And the Collabitt became a Christian after the Second World War, but particularly from the 60s. So the Collabitt are very strong Christians. They are evangelical, charismatic Christians, and understanding this conversation in that context is interesting and possibly a little will raise some questions about what the meaning of the forest might be to people specifically, I think. So before they became Christian, the Collabitt were animists. And I think some of these animistic feelings of connection with the natural environment are surfacing in the conversation that I'm going to be looking at. And this is expressed in something put up on Facebook, not in relation to this conversation, but as a distinct comment. And it is from a man who is a Collabitt, who actually is Muslim, but who draws on many different spiritual traditions, I believe, from my interactions with him on social media mostly. So he says, "We believe and we know that there are spirits inhabiting the forests or most anywhere. The old people advised to show the customary respect as we do to humans when we enter someone else's territory, space, or home. We either utter the words or by our attitude we show that we come in peace and respect. In fact, if you were to pee urgently in the forest or in the bushes in the golf course, it's considered good ethics to seek permission from whoever is in the vicinity, clearly meaning those in the other dimension who may be having a house, etc., right where one is doing it." So that expresses some of the sense that people have of the need to pay respect to the natural environment and to the spirits there. So this is a photo taken in 1987 of two people who were very close to me when I was doing my fieldwork in the 80s and 90s, the late Balang Palaba and the late Lawai Padan. And they are at a stone carving in the forest near Padale called the Batu Collabitt. Balang Palaba, the gentleman lower down, was, when he was young, a shaman. It wasn't an easy thing to talk about at the time that I did my research. I think it might not be now either, but there are no people left really who have memories of actually being a shaman. But he was also a friend of Puntumid, Twisted Heel, who is the Great Spirit, one expression of the Great Spirit. And I first heard about the entity called Puntumid on the 26th of September 1986, when Bayaribu, the headmaster of the school in Padale, told us that Balang Palaba, the gentleman I've just shown you, whose name actually means forever a tiger or very much a tiger, used to talk to Puntumid in the forest. And I then spoke to Balang Palaba about this briefly, because it wasn't the focus of my research at the time. I was really looking at growing rice. And he told me that Puntumid had given him materials that he could use, powerful substances, and had advised him on people's illnesses. But he said he had thrown away all of these because people had become Christian. And he didn't think, Bayaribu, the headmaster, didn't think that Balangkalaba could go and see Puntumid any longer. And indeed, Balangkalaba said he did not go to see Puntumid any longer. The next time I heard the word Puntumid was on the 11th of October 1986, I see from my diary, from a little boy who muttered it, looking at a Jack and the Beanstalk height chart that we brought for our baby daughter Molly, because I went on fieldwork with my husband and baby. And by that time I'd become a bit interested, and so I took the opportunity to ask about Puntumid when I could, mainly talking to Balangkalaba. Then I had a dream, which actually was probably, well, I would say it was due to my conversations with people, but I was told by people in Padale that this was actually a communication, as it were. I dreamt, so I had a dream about Puntumid the night before last, this is from my diary, that I had this strange weasel tail-like thing which would suddenly tighten around me and sometimes appear as a transformation of a post by the road or something. Then it turned into a huge man dressed in black who appeared sometimes to be an actor pretending to be Puntumid, but I wasn't sure. Sometimes he'd take off his headpiece and comment on how he was tired of being Puntumid. Then I heard the legend of the story of the origin of Puntumid, which was first told to me in July 1987 by Bayaribu. So the story goes that Puntumid, when he was originally a human, or a proto-human, sort of belonged to the race that predated humans, I was told. He was in the forest hunting with his brother, and there was a rock fall on his feet, and it turned his feet around, which of course is inversion, it's spirit related, the spirit world is inverted. So he became a spirit, and he said to his brother, you go back to the longhouse and continue to hunt hairy creatures, and I will stay in the forest, and I will hunt hairless ones, which means human beings. And so he stayed in the forest, and so he is kin to humans. But yes, so Puntumid is said. Hang on, I didn't really mean that too. Let's go back. Puntumid is said to have lived on mountain peaks and to have helped people, especially when they were going hunting. He was friendly with young men. And he would give powerful substances, as he did to Balangkalaba, to his young friends. And he would be able to eat people's spirits if they misbehave in the forest. And this includes various activities such as throwing citrus peel on the fire or heating rice on the fire in the forest. There are various things that people still seemed reluctant to do when we were living there because it might cause Puntumid to become upset. Now, so the Great Spirit. Puntumid is also referred to as the Great Spirit, Adat Raya. He's a source of great power, which in Klabit is Lalud. He's associated with the whole natural landscapes, multiple and one at the same time, and appears to humans in human-like form. So he appears as a huge man-like creature. He appeared to the Klabit, he also appears to the Penan. He's associated with the color white, which actually means transparent, and he has a red bracelet, and other parts of him are red, and red is also associated with the spirit world. And according to one old lady that I knew very well, Tipol Mong, she said, "Ngila Puntumid paado ngan lalud ngan tuan Allah kadiya ngato ya modang tonge luontana," which means long ago Puntumid was equal in power with the Lord God, for the Lord God made Puntumid to live on earth. And it seems somehow that you could make a parallel with notions of the forest spirit from the film Princess Mononoke by Miyazaki, or the Green Man in European mythology. And I do hesitate to make parallels across the world, but it echoed in my own mind. The Great Spirit seems to be the owner of the whole forest, to exemplify the whole natural landscape, but to humans seems to be believed to appear in a human-like form. Now, I would hypothesize that for the Kelabit, the Great Spirit seems to have both a male and a female form. So the Adat Raya is the male form, in which he makes friends with young men. But the Kelabit used to talk to me of Daraya too, which seems to be the same two words in a different form. And that was a female spirit with which women had relationships before Christianity. And people still say Do Daraya, which means good luck nowadays. So it's sort of morphed away from having a reference to a spirit. And when Christianity came in the 50s, especially after the revival in 1973, there was a very radical refounding of Christianity, you might say, in 1973 in the Kelabit Highlands. The Christians say that Tuhan does not want people to relate to Puntumid, and that Puntumid is afraid of Christ, and that Puntumid is a Satan or an Iblis. But that is not said about Daraya, the female form. Daraya still seems to be regarded as benevolent, although people don't speak much now of Daraya. But when I was there in the 80s and 90s, older women would talk of Daraya as benevolent. And some older people told me that Daraya was the same as God Almighty, in fact. Yes. So with Christianity, a very different approach to relating to the world came in, and people had more contact with the outside world. People believed that becoming to Christian and relating to Christ rather than to the Great Spirit would be associated with success in the world, and they have done very well. In fact, the Kelabit have had very successful educational careers with very good jobs, and have abandoned most of their pre-Christian practices and stopped worrying about the potential impact of relating to the natural environment in ways that were exploitative. There is some worry about cutting down big trees, for example, particularly Lonok, the strangler fig. But basically people feel that they don't need to worry about retribution from the natural environment. But spirits can still be dangerous, and air accidents that have occurred near mountains in the Highlands have sometimes been attributed to the Great Spirit being, the spirits of the area, or the Great Spirit responding to the logging of that mountainous area. Now to go on to the meat of this. So this is the same Kelabit, Medan Maya or Medan Abdullah or Maya Green, he calls himself different things, speaking of the impact on the natural environment of too much exploitation, and his response to the feelings of the trees, as it were, to cutting down all those trees. I won't read the whole of this because I don't really think I have the time. But there is a yearning among the Kelabit, I think, for the forested homeland. And people living down in town who have been brought up in the Highlands feel a desire to go back, and some have gone back to live up there, in fact. And this was a response on the part of another Kelabit to that poem by Medan Maya, saying how much he felt that that poem had made him be aware of the significance of the natural environment. I think I'm going to have to hurry up here. And okay, I'll try. I think there's been a softening of people's feelings about the satanization, as it were, of the spirits of the natural world, which is part of a sort of a rejection of their own identity as people of the forests. And it seems to have bled into a desire to maintain past beliefs and spiritual practices. So the conversation, and there have been recent encounters with Puntumid where it seems that Puntumid has been said to be trying to make friends with young men who have actually rejected this so far. And Puntumid is said to be sad and lonely in the forest. But this Facebook conversation seemed to show an increasing interest in Puntumid. And this was started by a post by Tadun Bala on the 12th of September 2013, who told of the experiences he'd had with two other young men, Samson and Dunstan, in the deep forest on a hunting trip. Samson was leading and he unexpectedly turned sharp right at a certain point. It later transpired that this was because he'd seen a set of huge footprints going up the ridge in front of them, which he assumed were those of Puntumid. And Geoffrey's response, Geoffrey is Tadun Bala, "I'd love to meet the gentleman," I said. "Ain't you scared, man?" said Samson. "No, I wanted to ask him for the red friendship bangle," to go back to the red bracelet that I mentioned earlier. And Tadun, I'll read you maybe some of the rest of this conversation, which I haven't put up here. Tadun Bala, when he heard this, was disappointed. Wanted to meet the gentleman. "Come on, Samson," he said. "You're supposed to be the strongest man in the Bible story. Why are you so scared? Maybe you're strong no more because your hair's gone," I continued, grumbling for missing the chance to see Puntumid. "Cool, man," him said, laughing. "You can go and see him later." When I went to search for Puntumid later, I saw him under a rock cave, sharpening his 4x15 spear. Immediately when he saw me with full rage, he charged, shouting why I entered his territory without respect. "Respect!" I ran straight downhill, shouting back, "Sorry, dude, I'm lost, never meant to be there." When I caught up again with my friends Samson and Dunstan, they asked no questions but knew what had happened and scrambled for their cameras. Well, some of you knew immediately. Puntumid chased me after, saw a photo of shaking me yesterday. If you want to know whether this story is real, either you ask Samson or Dunstan, or you could go to Apad Bawang Runan yourself. And then this led to others expressing an interest to meet him. "Love to meet and make peace with the big man. Hopefully we can have him to be an ally," said Radu Udelove. And then we have, like you, I'd like to meet him and ask him for a red bracelet. And like you, I'd like to have an encounter with the man and probably warn him up and be friends. I always thought that he's not a bad person, and Kalabic folklore likes to make him out to be. He's just misunderstood. So, and Tom Bala said, "Don't worry, going into Puntumid's territory, he's good and very nice, protector of all the lands and mountains. Sometimes he got irritated when you don't respect and strictly follow protocol." So in early 2014, I started another Facebook conversation about Puntumid myself, and I was asking, is Puntumid a physical being? And this followed, and a debate followed about this topic as to whether he could be seen as having a physical presence. As part of this conversation, we began talking about friendship with Puntumid. And one of the contributors related a story about how in a certain village, Puntumid was wandering around killing people because he can invisibly spear you and drink your blood if you don't behave. So the Dayong of the village went to talk to Puntumid, was told to avoid being hunted, that people mustn't go outside when it's raining and sunny at the same time. Udan Idang, they call that here. But then they made friends with Puntumid, became Aja, and after that, when they met him, they'd introduce himself and be left alone. So Medan Maya's response was, "Yes, Stephen Raja, those days the divide between the manifest and the hidden worlds was not wide. As you said, friendships were forged across the divide, so actually we're the ones going away from him. Gradually we ignore his existence, and over time the communication's broken. Maybe he's just trying to make contact when we go hunting in the deep jungle." And we talked about Puntumid's loneliness. I said, Balang Palabo said Puntumid wasn't bad and he was sad because his human friends have abandoned him. And Stephen Raja said, "Oh, I see, he cried because he was lonely. That makes sense." and seems to indicate that he needs the company of people. So when people dry their clothes over the fire, he gets their smell and cries to show them he's around. He approaches them to indicate his presence and not as a danger. My presumption. His presumption, that is. And we talked about the nature and location of Puntumead. And one, I won't be very long. I won't be very long. Yes, I've only got one more slide. So Paul said that he said there's a presence of Puntumead in my area, and one other said, I think Puntumead is everywhere where people believe in him. So I was just going to show you this little bit of video about how the Great Spirit can also appear as a dragon, because I'm currently researching beliefs about a dragon's naga, they're called, or a Munagug in the Clubbit Highlands. But I won't show you that because I don't have time. With Christianity, I haven't seen any comments about Puntumead recently in relation to Christianity. But here are my concluding thoughts. With regard, yes, anyway. So what does Puntumead express about Clubbit perceptions of the nature of the Great Spirit? The Great Spirit is in fact nature, the entirety of the natural environment. It's protective and nurturing, but requires humans to recognize their place. The Great Spirit wishes to communicate with humans. As Puntumead, it takes the male form and makes friends with young men. And what is the significance of this these Facebook conversations about Puntumead? So, were they just playing? Were these conversations serious? We have to ask this. And I think at some level, they perhaps were. But I think also we can ask, is it a metaphor or a yearning for physical connection with the natural world? Does it express a sense of the desire to respect nature? Is it an expression of a desire to connect with nature on a more spiritual level? What do we see in the future? I don't know. But I hope that Christianity can make peace with these methods of connecting with the natural environment, and that it will be possible for people to have this connection, material or spiritual, strengthened with the natural environment, even if it is through the Great Spirit. Thank you.